Hey everybody, welcome back to the Overwatch League Report. I'm Brian.
I'm Ben.
And Ben, we're actually going to start talking about maybe some teams that are going to be decent, or at least teams that were somewhat decent last year.
Yeah, I mean, if you saw the Charge Dynasty show match, I don't know if you consider the Dynasty looking particularly decent, but we'll get to that.
A little bit of shade off the top, but that's why they pay us the big bucks to bring the shade immediately. Yep. No one's actually paying us, but if anyone wants to, we're open to it.
Yeah, I would definitely take money for shade.
We'll shade for free.
I already do it for free.
Alright, man, let's talk about the Seoul Dynasty, and we're going to start off with their coaches. Head coach is KDG. He's a South Korean coach. He joined in August, and he's formerly the Six Snakes head coach.
Most people just say Snakes.
Well, you know what? That's not leap speak. If you want to do Snakes, it'd be a 5 or 2. You get away with the 2, but a 6. So obviously he's off to a terrible start. Can't be trusted with that kind of spelling. Ben, how's he doing actually?
Well, I mean, if you look at Snake's record, especially coming out of season 2, they actually did pretty good. He took them from basically being kind of a no-name trials team into a pretty decent finishing in season 2 of EU Contenders. Whether that's success is going to translate to the Seoul Dynasty is absolutely TBD. I know a lot of the context of what we're going to talk about during this is going to be probably from the show match that was done, the Pacific Challenge or whatever it was called, between the Guangzhou Charge and the Seoul Dynasty. This is one of the only show matches that we've seen of current Overwatch League teams. The Valiant have done a few show matches with the Shock and the XL, but honestly, they've been kind of a mess. And
I don't know, Ben. I feel like that there were other show matches. Maybe we weren't supposed to see them, but they were out there.
Well, I mean,
I don't want to throw any shade, but the channel that leaks those, I've been told he's better than us in our comments. Yeah. So,
can you really call it a show match if it's not supposed to be shown?
No, I mean a leak match.
Yeah. But yeah, of the matches between current Overwatch League teams that we were supposed to see, the Dynasty Charge show match is definitely the most interesting one. Definitely gave the most information and was the most surprising result in my opinion. So looking at that show match, it ended in a draw, right? They only played 4 maps. It ended in a 2-2 draw. But if you were to look at which team played better, the Charge, I would have to say, played better. The 2 maps that they lost, they were a lot closer to potentially winning the 2 maps that the Dynasty lost.
Right.
So when you take the Charge, who we talked about already, and who, I've talked about as potentially not being that great of a team. Obviously, we released that video before the show match happened. Otherwise, I would have been a little bit softer on them, because I think that they very much impressed me.
Yeah, well, the universe is like working in ways to just undermine anything we say on this show, it feels like.
Yeah, so well, but that's obviously, like, there are things that are out of our control that kind of change reality. This is a mea culpa. I definitely think I underrated the Charge, but I now have the opportunity to not overrate the Dynasty like everybody did last season.
More shade.
And so I think that come back to KDG. I think that KDG did a great job building Snakes up to a position that Like they did way better than anyone thought they were going to do in season 2 of EU Contenders, and a lot of that can likely come back to the coaching. The Dynasty coming into this season is rebuilding their entire coaching staff, so maybe that will help them. They've also stripped half their roster. They brought in some new talent. Whether that new talent is going to do a whole lot based off of the show match that we saw is also TBD. But I think that KDG is a good head coach. I think that he can potentially lead them to more success than they had last season.
Fair enough. What about the assistant coach, Chagun? He is a South Korean coach and formerly coached for the London Spitfire.
So Changgun, like you mentioned, is coming from the Spitfire last season, and he is one of the people who is given a lot of credit for building the Spitfire roster that ended up doing really well.
They were pretty good,
Yeah, but so he's responsible for that, and he's also responsible for. Partially at least responsible for the decision that was made post Stage 3 to basically drop / inactivate half of their roster and just basically have their top 6 players, the Prophet, Birdring, Gesture, Fury, Nuss, and Bedosin, top 6. And say, get rid of everybody else, put them on inactive, drop them from the team. We're just going to focus all of our attention on making sure this 6-person roster is as good as they can be.
Right.
And they bounced back, and they obviously, that strategy obviously paid off, given that they won.
I don't want to be results-oriented, Ben.
Yeah, I mean...
Just because they absolutely dominated the finals, whatever.
Right, so... You could definitely say whether or not that kind of put all your eggs in one basket strategy is good, and maybe it's something that we'll see this season with the Dynasty. If at a certain point there are players in the Dynasty who the coaching staff and management just feel are kind of dead weight a little bit, whether we'll see Changgun push for this roster to be cut down to 6 or 7 players. That's definitely something to keep in mind.
See. No one's safe, guys. Better step it up. All right, Ben, tell me a little bit about why not the South Korean coach formerly of O2 Ardent.
Yeah, I actually don't know too much about why not, but I know a ton about O2 Ardent.
Why not?
I mean, he's not a huge a big name. The other two are a lot more well known. So O2 Ardent was a fantastic team. They just merged with Stormquake, who did very well this past contender season, to become O2 Blast after all of the old O2 Ardent players kind of got sniped by Overwatch League teams.
Right.
Which happens. So
it happens.
Yeah, it happens now. Yeah. So I think that's a great thing on Why Not's resume. I don't think that you can really come from that successful of a team and be an incompetent coach. So that definitely lends to him being a good presence for the Dynasty.
So let's talk about the players, starting out with Zunba. He's a South Korean flex who mains Zarya, Diva, and Roadhog.
Yeah, so Zunba is the primary off-tank position from the team. He is one of the strongest players on the team, in my opinion. And if you can, and he was definitely one of the biggest performers. Looking at the show match that they had, him, Rujie Hong, Fleta, Munchkin, Fissure all did very strong, performed very strongly in that show match. Zunba, especially in the maps that he was on, was a great addition, and he is also one of their best players from last season. So I expect him to continue to perform well. We'll talk a little bit later about a player that was brought in that was theoretically, I think, supposed to to replace him, quote unquote, or like at least be his backup. But that doesn't seem to be something that's going to be in the cards based off of his performance.
Oof. Let's move on to Ruji Hong, South Korean support player who mains Ana and Zenyatta.
Yeah, so Ruji Hong is not only probably the best player on the Dynasty, he is one of the best Zenyatta players in the world, in my opinion. Before Jonak came up in the scene during last season, Ruji Hong was basically like the face of Zenyatta players. And then, Jonak, who came up and basically like idolized Ruji Hong. And now Jonak is considered the best Zenyatta player in the world. So that kind of shows like how much Ruji Hong is respected as a player, as a piece of talent within the game. And I think that he'll continue to perform very well. He was a great performer in the show match. He was a great performer last season. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't continue to be a strong player, especially on Zenyatta, who is a great hero right now. Still in the meta even after the Goats nerf.
Right.
I don't see any reason why Zenyatta would cycle out at this point. So I think that's where we're at.
All right, let's move on to Toby, the South Korean support player who mains Lucio, Mercy, Ana, and Torbjorn. I don't know why this is on there, but there we go.
So Toby was their main healer support player last season, and he may still be their main healer. I think that Jexay, we'll talk about later, is also super strong. So it's going to be interesting to see which of them really sees the most amount of play. I think that Toby is probably slightly worse on Lucio, who is the main healer hero being played right now. But I think that he's the more well-rounded player overall. So we'll kind of see what compositions the meta requires and which role he'll fill. I'm pretty sure he's going to see play though, at least temporarily, until maybe there's some shift that maybe requires some other skills that Jexay can potentially perform better.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about Fleta, the South Korean DPS player who mains Widowmaker, Genji, and Pharah.
Yeah, again, another player still rolling over from last season. Fleta is incredibly strong DPS player. He's very impressive when he's popping off. And I think that it's very unlikely that he'll get cycled out, especially because the other, besides him and Munchkin, the other DPS players they've brought on have not shown themselves to be particularly impressive. So I think Fleta will continue to be a important cog in the Dynasty wheel, and especially with the meta kind of cycling more towards a DPS heavy builds. Fleta could definitely be a strong performer in next season.
Right.
He was one of the people in the show match that did particularly well, or at least held his own compared to some of the other players who we'll get to later. So,
all right, well, talk to me. You just mentioned him a little bit about Munchkin. He's South Korean DPS, mains Tracer, McCree, and Widowmaker.
Yeah, so Munchkin is generally considered one of the Tracers in the league. And with Tracer, as mentioned in previous videos, potentially being a key hero coming into this new meta from the early reports from professional players who have been playing for the last week or two on the test server, and then now live. Now that the patch is live, it seems like Tracer is going to play an important role, at least in Stage 1 of Overwatch League. And I expect Munchkin to perform extremely well on Tracer as expected. So as long as he's not burning out, I think that he'll probably do pretty well and could carry them through a potential strong stage 1.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Fissure. He is the South Korean tank player. He is formerly of the LA Gladiators,
Yep.
and he mains Winston, Reinhardt, and Orisa.
So this is going to be an interesting thing to talk about here.
Okay, let's get into it. I'm excited.
Are you familiar with the drama surrounding Fissure from the end of last season?
I'm not too familiar with it, and let's pretend the audience has no idea at all.
All right, so the LA Gladiators last season made the overall playoffs. The what's it called? What is it called? The league playoffs or whatever, not the stage playoffs.
Yeah.
So,
the league final? I don't know.
They made the playoffs, right?
Right.
And
the real playoffs.
Yeah, the real playoffs.
Yeah.
And they basically. Here's the thing.
Oh boy.
We were talking about earlier about how the Spitfire, destroyed everyone and ran the playoffs. That may not have happened had Fissure actually played against them in the Gladiators versus Spitfire match. So there was a lot apparently of drama surrounding Fissure on the Gladiators.
Mm-hmm.
He seemed to be from some reports a bit of a diva, and not like the diva who's
right, not that diva,
not that diva.
Like
yeah,
not good diva if you're trying to make a good team.
Right. So there was he either ended up getting benched or benching himself, quote unquote.
Okay.
From the playoff games, playoff matches, and this potentially resulted in the Gladiators performing significantly worse in the playoffs than they otherwise would have.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also saw whether this is, related to some. It doesn't look good, but in the show match, he called for a pause during, I believe, map 3.
Okay.
And apparently there were some technical issues. He called for a pause, and there were people saying that he was just icing the charge, and there wasn't actually technical issues. Right. That's all speculation. From my understanding, I think there was technical issues. I'm just trying to report all of the angles here, so don't come after me by saying, "Oh, you're just spreading fake news," or you're
we're gonna have
spreading
a whole
conspiracy
comment
theories.
Section full of fans of his, aren't we? Again,
all right, listen.
The fan all over again.
I will say, Fissure is a phenomenal player when he's not being a head case.
Oh boy. All right, well, moving on from Fissure, let's talk a little bit about Michelle. He's a South Korean player. He's formerly of Lucky Future Zenith, and he's a flex player, but they didn't list any signature heroes.
Yeah, so at least during the show match, they put him in for Zunba in that kind of off-tank kind of position. I believe he played mostly Diva.
Okay.
But I mean, that's obviously not necessarily going to carry over into the future.
Yeah, it'll all depend.
Right. So this is who I was talking about earlier when I was mentioning that Zunba shouldn't, be worried about his position as a starter.
Right.
It's really interesting because, Lucky Future Zenith is a really strong team. They're the best team in Chinese contenders for seasons 1 and 2. And Michelle and Marvel were both very strong players on that team, but I don't know if I'm not sure if it was just because it was Chinese contenders where kind of there's a lower skill cap than others, or if it was just kind of their first time on the big Overwatch League stage.
Right. But
both Michelle and Marvel, who we'll talk about probably next, very, very much underperformed in that show match, and a lot of people were surprised that they did so poorly. Michelle, to a lesser extent, I think Michelle was kind of average to below average. And I think at this point you can definitely kind of pencil him in as just kind of a backup to Zumba, especially where we are now, where that kind of like off tank, flex tank role may be less important. I think that it's very unlikely that Michelle is going to see a ton of play, in my opinion.
Right.
And when we talk about Coach Park potentially cutting the team down later in the season,
might be one of the people on the block. Is what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about another former Lucky Future Zenith player, Marvel. He is a tank. He's from South Korea, and he mains Winston Reinhardt. And you were saying that he didn't perform particularly well in their show match.
No, I think that he was.
The look you just gave me was like, no.
He was just short of being an unmitigated disaster, in my opinion. Fissure has like potential personality issues, but at least Fissure is an amazing player. He's one of the best main tanks in the game.
That's why he's allowed to be a diva, because he's so good.
Yeah, he's allowed to be a diva because he's so good on Ryan.
Right.
There's so much mileage to come out of that joke. There's so much pun mileage there. I didn't even notice until after I said it. But yeah, so I don't think, unless Fissure has a meltdown, I don't think Marvel is gonna see play.
Right.
Especially after that performance, that was like, I recommend you to go watch. I think you should definitely check out the show match. It was very entertaining, and I think that you could definitely see that that Marvel had no idea what he was doing, especially in the first map.
Right.
So.
All right, so let's move on to Jexy. He is a South Korean player, formerly of Element Mystic. He is support, and he mains Lucio, Mercy, and Ana.
I think it's pretty clear that that Jexy is kind of being like coming in as a replace for Gambler, who was released, and I think that he's kind of doing a pretty good job filling that role. I think that, like I mentioned earlier when we were talking about Toby, that they'll probably split time in that support role. I think that of the new players coming onto the team, besides Fissure, I guess, because the players that are new to Overwatch League, the 4 players that are new to Owl, Jexy is definitely the best. And I could definitely see a situation where he actually ends up becoming their main starting healer. He's very impressive on Lucio, and as long as Lucio is still seeing play, which I don't really see a reason why he wouldn't be, at least in the short term. I think that he's a great addition to the team, and he actually showed up and performed very well in the show match.
Right. So let's round out this episode with Fitz, the South Korean player formerly of Going Water S, and he's a DPS player with no heroes listed under his main. So tell me where you can expect him to play and what the role he's going to fill on this team is.
Yeah, I actually know very little about Fitz. He's coming from kind of a
same with Liquidpedia.
He's coming from kind of a no-name team, and he only played one. He played the least out of anybody in the Charge show match. He played one map at the very end, and he did not play very well, in my opinion.
Right.
He mostly was on Widow, and then he switched to Zarya when they played a Goats comp. And I don't think he played either hero particularly well, especially Zarya. He seems like an okay Widowmaker player, though, but he's not to the level of Fleta. So I don't really see what the point of him being picked up is.
Right.
I just it seems kind of superfluous to me. Like the other like Michelle and Marvel, like were good players coming from a good team. They have potential to like actually fill kind of a role where they come in every now and then for maps. And even though they put up a poor performance in the show match, that's like they have a body of work to kind of back them up. And the players that they would be coming in for are players that are a lot less consistent or reliable. Right. So it kind of makes sense. I don't really see the point of bringing Fitz on unless they are planning on running 3 DPSs at certain points, which maybe is a thing that needs to be done. Mm-hmm. But if that's the case, I don't think that's good for them because I don't particularly see Fitz as being a super strong player from the little I've seen of him. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. I think, again, if there is a situation where we see Coach Park coming in and slicing and dicing.
Oh, man. Well, my expert opinion on this team is no one is a Reaper main, so they're not going to be able to do anything. I don't know and obviously the meta maybe translates differently to professional players than to, not professional players.
No.
However, if someone knows how to play Reaper, I would imagine he'd be very effective in the current, iteration of the game.
I mean, yeah, we haven't seen a ton of super high level professional play on the new patch, so it's theoretically possible that we are entering the Reaper meta.
The year of Reaper.
The year. Hopefully not the year. That would be bad.
Never gonna nerf him.
Hopefully, maybe the month of Reaper. Yeah.
Hopefully, because Ben. Oof.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else we want to cover on this team before we say goodbye to the viewers?
I think that I obviously was a little bit hard on them because I think that
because of the show
they
match.
Because of the show match, of course, but they came in last season. They were really heavily hyped up. They underperformed.
Right.
They trimmed down. They rebuilt a little bit. They came in the start of this season. They have this show match against a team that most people are putting in like the bottom 5, right?
Right.
With the in the charge, and it's just it was bad. They basically lost. I mean, it was a tie, but they for all intents and purposes lost, and it was just not. Loss. Yeah, it was a spiritual loss, right? If there was a 5th map, they were definitely not favored to win that. So I don't see that being a good omen for their season. Maybe they can turn it around. Maybe it was it was a fluke situation, but it's just not great for that to be the first appearance that you have as this new roster.
Right.
So I'm hopeful that they can turn it around. I'd like to see them do well. They have a lot of talent on their team. And I think that the coaching changes they've made were very good. So we'll see. I want to be proven wrong. I would like to reiterate that when I'm down on a team, I would like to be proven wrong.
No, I think it means that you hate them and you want them to lose every game, Ben, from what people seem to think.
I don't want as a fan of the Overwatch League, I don't want to go into the league and have half of the teams being, garbage, right? That's not fun. Course. Yeah. It's not entertaining to watch like a quarter of the matches just be bad teams playing bad teams, right? That's not entertaining.
Of course not.
So I every time I talk about a team and criticize them, I want to be proven wrong. I want them to turn out to be better than I think they'll be.
Right. All right. So with that, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Make sure you check us out on Twitch at twitch.tv/WickedEverything, on Twitter at WGEverything, on Instagram at WickedEverything. Ben, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Ben Sharon, and that's etc., etc. You can. Most of my stuff is linked to my Twitter, so if you go there, you can find other stuff.
And make sure to check out the videos that we have going on almost every single day on the channel. And if we're not uploading a video, we most certainly have a stream going on. We just did a 6-hour anniversary stream that you can check out, including the last like 2 hours. Right, we played Overwatch. Introduction of our future team. So you wanna check that out.
Yeah, and check out our backlog of Overwatch support videos. We have one for every team, besides the Seoul Dynasty as well. So check those out. Other than the ones that did better than the Seoul Dynasty last season, which are to come.
Right, and yeah. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. We appreciate it greatly. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.